A racist cop thought he could get away with another false arrest, until he slapped the cuffs on the wrong black man. Minutes later, his career was over. Sergeant Ethan Calloway lounged in his patrol car, lazily stretching as he scanned the empty road. His shift had been dull, uneventful. He was itching for some action. Then, his eyes locked onto a black sedan moving just a little faster than the rest. The driver, a black man in an expensive suit, radiated confidence, too much confidence. Calloway smirked. He despised that attitude, the kind that made it seem like the law didn't apply to them. Got one, he muttered, flipping on his lights. The car obediently pulled over. But what irritated Calloway even more was the driver's face, calm, unreadable. No panic. No hesitation. Calloway stepped out, walked up to the window and rapped on the glass. License and registration. The man silently retrieved his wallet and handed over his documents. Is there a problem, officer? Calloway smirked. You were speeding. He lied. The driver arched an eyebrow. I was going 35 in a 40 zone. That tone. Calloway hated the way black men spoke to him as if they were his equals. He glanced inside the car. Spotless. No open bottles, no drugs, no weapons. Damn it. Step out of the vehicle. On what grounds? Calloway jutted his chin forward, resting, hand on his cuffs. Don't make me use force. The man sighed, then calmly opened the door and stepped out. Hands on the hood. He complied, unsettlingly composed. You're making a mistake, officer. Calloway scoffed. I decide what's a mistake. He spun the man around, twisted his arm back, and snapped the cuffs on. You're under arrest for resisting. The man didn't resist, didn't even flinch. He simply stared at Calloway. That look, there was no fear. It was as if he was evaluating him. A quiet, creeping unease slithered into Calloway's gut. You'll regret this. Calloway chuckled, leading the man toward the patrol car. He had no idea how prophetic those words would soon become. Escorting the detainee down the hall of New Orleans Police Department, NOPD, Calloway felt a rush of satisfaction. He lived for this moment. The instant someone realized they were in real trouble. Calloway shoved the man into the hard chair inside Interrogation Room 3, NOPD headquarters. Take a seat, boss. He sneered. The man sat upright, crossing his arms. No anger. No panic. Just a look in his eyes, something calculating, as if he had expected this all along. Name? Calloway asked lazily, beginning to fill out the report. Malcolm Reed. Calloway froze for a second. That name, it sounded familiar. But he brushed it off. He smirked. He was used to protests, to pleas for a phone call, to furious yelling. But this silence, this made him uneasy. All right, Mr. Big Shot. Calloway scoffed and walked over to the duty desk. Officer Raymond Carter was at the computer, entering the detainee's information. Suddenly he stiffened. His eyes widened, as if he had just seen a ghost. Jesus, Ethan. Carter's voice was strangled. You just arrested Louisiana Attorney General. A cold knot coiled in Calloway's stomach. You're joking. Wordlessly, Carter turned the screen toward him. There, staring back at him, was the official government photo of Malcolm Reed. Next to it, in bold letters, Louisiana Attorney General. Calloway's stomach lurched. Cold sweat prickled at his forehead. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Carter hissed. That man oversees every cop in this state. He fights corruption and abuse of power, and you just arrested him on a fake charge. Calloway swallowed hard. Maybe he won't make a big deal out of it. Are you insane? Look outside. Calloway turned toward the window. A chilling dread wrapped around his spine. Outside, journalists packed the entrance of New Orleans Police Department, NOPD. Cameras flashed. Microphones shot up. The news had already spread. At that moment, the door to Interrogation Room 3, NOPD headquarters swung open. Malcolm Reed emerged, flanked by the lieutenant and the precinct chief, Officer Ethan Calloway. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay an unshakable steel. I suggest you find a good lawyer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it lightly on the desk in front of Calloway, who stood frozen, his face drained of color. Then Reed leaned in slightly, his voice dropping just enough for Calloway to hear. "Oh, and I will most certainly be attending your hearing." Calloway couldn't utter a single word as the man he had recklessly thrown in handcuffs walked out of the precinct. Flashbulbs erupted. Reporters shouted over each other, jostling for the best shot. And in that moment Ethan Calloway knew his career was over. The courtroom buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Journalists filled every row. Cameras clicked relentlessly. Spectators whispered, trading theories and disbelief over the scandal that had rocked the state. No one could believe that a low-ranking police officer had dared to arrest the Louisiana Attorney General. Sergeant Ethan Calloway sat at the defense table, his face flushed with tension. He had been assured this was just a formality, but deep down he knew something was wrong. The courtroom doors suddenly swung open. Malcolm Reed entered. His tailored suit was impeccable, and his every step deliberate, exuding an air of control. He moved as though he commanded the entire room. Silence fell instantly. Even the most skeptical onlookers dared not speak. Calloway stiffened as Reed passed by and took his seat at the prosecution's table. Their eyes met. No anger. Just cold calculation. Court is now in session. Judge Eleanor Whitmore announced as she stepped into the courtroom. "We are here today for the case of the unlawful arrest of Louisiana Attorney General Malcolm Reed by Officer Ethan Calloway." Calloway swallowed hard. Reed stood. "Your Honor, I request that this trial be fully public and transparent." His voice carried through the courtroom. "Let the people see how the system operates." Judge Whitmore nodded. "Proceed." "Who do you think you are, acting like you're special? That fancy suit doesn't impress anyone." Malcolm Reed glanced at him, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He said nothing. That only irritated Ethan Calloway more. The first piece of evidence was the arrest video. The screen in Louisiana Supreme Court lit up, displaying Calloway ordering Reed out of the vehicle without cause, then immediately slapping handcuffs on him. The journalists murmured. The audience gasped. "Officer Ethan, you claimed I resisted arrest." Reed spoke, his gaze fixed on Calloway. "Do you see any resistance in this footage?" Calloway's throat went dry. "Well, not exactly. You fabricated the charges." "I was just doing my job." Calloway blurted out, then instantly realized his mistake. Judge Eleanor Whitmore banged the gavel. "Order in the court." Reed continued, his voice unwavering. "The truth is, Sergeant, you are a product of a system that has shielded police misconduct for years. Today, this Louisiana Supreme Court isn't just deciding your fate, it's deciding the fate of every person who has suffered injustice." Calloway clenched his fists but said nothing. An hour later, Judge Eleanor Whitmore delivered the verdict. "Officer Ethan Calloway, you are hereby suspended from duty, effective immediately. Additionally, a criminal investigation for abuse of power is being opened against you." The world beneath Ethan Calloway crumbled. Without sparing him a glance, Malcolm Reed stood up and walked out of the courtroom. But the scandal was only beginning. 2 weeks had passed since the trial. Sergeant Ethan Calloway sat in his smoke-filled apartment, his eyes locked onto the TV screen. Police scandal, racial profiling arrest of Louisiana Attorney General. His face appeared side by side with Malcolm Reed on the news. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, reaching for a bottle of whiskey. He had thought the system would protect him. But once the case went public, everyone turned their backs. The next day, his police badge no longer worked at the station. "Sergeant, you're suspended." The receptionist avoided his gaze. "You know this is politics. I was just following orders." "Orders from above, Ethan. They want you at headquarters." At headquarters, Commissioner Robert Hayes and a team of lawyers were already waiting. "Sergeant Ethan Calloway, you are under internal investigation." Calloway exhaled sharply. "Because of that damn Malcolm Reed?" The commissioner shook his head. "It's not just that. We've reviewed your entire record, your arrests, complaints, violations, video evidence. You've drawn too much attention, Ethan Calloway. We can't ignore it anymore. You're throwing me away like garbage? The commissioner crossed his arms. You're a liability. The department needs a new image. Calloway's world collapsed. He had served for 20 years, had exploited the system for 20 years, and now the system no longer protected him. A week later, he was formally charged with excessive force, falsifying reports, and systemic discrimination. His lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. Ethan Calloway, this is serious. Plead guilty, take the deal. You'll get probation, but you'll lose your badge forever. I won't plead guilty. The lawyer silently slid a phone across the table. On the screen, Calloway's own voice played. They're always hiding something. Keep them scared. He froze. This is a setup. No, Ethan Calloway. This is the consequence. The trial was public. Cameras captured every second. Calloway sat there, fists clenched, avoiding the gaze of the crowd. When Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered, the courtroom rose. Ethan Calloway, the Louisiana Supreme Court finds you guilty on all counts. You are permanently barred from law enforcement and sentenced to 3 years of probation. The crowd murmured. A few people clapped. Ethan Calloway stared at the floor. He had lost. But the worst part was Malcolm Reed's gaze. No anger. No triumph. Just cold satisfaction. They stood face to face. Happy now? Calloway growled. Reed adjusted his cufflinks. Justice has been served, Sergeant. Go to hell. Reed smirked. The system didn't betray you, Ethan Calloway. It just doesn't work for you anymore. He turned and walked away, leaving Calloway alone with his shattered illusions. Outside, reporters cheered. Justice had prevailed. Justice has prevailed, but what do you think about this story? If you were in Malcolm Reed's position, how would you handle this situation? And if you were Ethan Calloway, would you realize your mistake before it was too late? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story made you reflect, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and family to spread the message of fairness and integrity. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Let's work together to build a society where everyone is treated equally, regardless of race or status. This content has been compiled and rewritten with AI assistance and does not represent any specific individual or organization. Any resemblance to real events or persons is purely coincidental.